She arrived at the school just before sunrise, as she did every morning, carrying the same old bag with her cleaning cloths neatly folded inside. The courtyard was still empty, the sky still soft, and the only sound came from the rustle of trees as a light breeze passed through them. She liked arriving early because the quiet made her feel calm. It gave her a moment of peace before the long day of work ahead. She walked slowly toward the main building, her steps steady and relaxed, knowing no one would notice her arrival. People rarely noticed her at all. Inside the hallway, she placed her bag in a small corner of the storage room where she usually kept her things. She tied her hair back, washed her hands, and took a deep breath. Then she began her routine, moving from classroom to classroom, making sure each one looked clean and fresh. She didn't rush. She liked doing things properly, even though no one ever mentioned it or thanked her. But she did it for herself, not for recognition. By the time students started arriving, she was already in the music wing. She often saved that area for last, because she liked being there the most. The wooden floors, the faint smell of polished instruments, and the soft echo created by the walls made the place feel different from the rest of the school. Even when empty, the music rooms felt alive. That morning, she stood in the center of the main music room, mopping the floor slowly. The grand piano, covered with a cloth, sat in the corner as if asleep. She paused for a moment, letting her eyes settle on it longer than usual. She knew she shouldn't touch it, and she never had. But simply being in the same room made something in her chest tighten and soften at the same time. As she turned back to her work, she heard footsteps. A group of teachers had gathered in the hallway, chatting as they prepared for the day. They barely glanced at her as they passed by. They spoke about their busy schedules, the upcoming cultural night, and how stressful things had become lately. None of it involved her, so she kept cleaning quietly. One teacher eventually walked into the music room. He was new and still learning everyone's names. When he saw her, he gave a polite smile and said, "Good morning." She nodded back gently. Most teachers didn't speak to her unless they needed something cleaned quickly, so she appreciated even the smallest greeting. He placed a stack of music sheets on the table and glanced at the piano. "Do you like music?" he asked casually, noticing how her eyes lingered on the instrument. She quickly looked away. "It's nice to listen to," she replied quietly. "Ever played?" he asked, half joking, half curious. She shook her head with a small smile. "Oh no, not me. I just clean here." She hoped the conversation would end there. She didn't like attention. The teacher chuckled lightly, assuming she meant she didn't know anything about music. "Well, if you ever want to play a note or two, feel free," he said. "The room is full of sound anyway. One more sound won't hurt." She simply nodded and continued mopping, grateful when he left the room. She wasn't offended. She just didn't want anyone asking questions. The piano was a part of a life she kept far away from this one. When the bell rang, she stepped aside as students rushed down the hallway, laughing and shouting. She always made sure not to get in their way. Many of them didn't even realize she worked there. Some assumed she was a visitor. Others didn't look at her at all. She didn't mind. She preferred to blend into the background, but no matter how busy the hallways grew, she always returned to the music room during short breaks. She never played a single note. She simply stood there, sometimes closing her eyes for a brief second, remembering something she didn't speak about anymore, something she hid deep within herself. Each time the sound of footsteps approached, she quickly returned to cleaning so no one would notice. Later that afternoon, the school grew noisy as choir practice began. The sound of students warming up filled the hallways, and she smiled without meaning to. Music had a way of softening her heart, even after so many years. She stepped into the room to empty the trash bin, trying not to draw attention. While she was leaving, the choir instructor accidentally dropped a folder of sheet music. She bent down immediately to help pick it up. "Oh, thank you," the instructor said, reaching for the paper's dot as she handed them over. The instructor noticed the way she handled the sheets carefully, almost tenderly, as if she understood their value. "You like classical pieces, don't you?" the instructor asked casually. She froze for a moment, not sure how to answer. "They sound beautiful," she finally said. "Well, feel free to listen in any time," the instructor said with a warm smile. "We always need an audience who appreciates music." She nodded again, feeling a warmth in her chest that she hadn't felt in a long time. She wished she could explain what music meant to her, but she didn't. She simply finished her work and left. Evening, after everyone had gone home, she returned to the music room to finish wiping the floors. The sun was setting outside, casting an orange glow across the polished wood. She walked over to the piano once more and gently placed her hand on the cover. She didn't lift it. She never let herself, but she let her fingers rest there for a moment. Her heart felt heavy, not with sadness, but with memories. She whispered something softly under her breath, as if speaking to someone from a different time in her life. The room felt warm, quiet, safe. She finally stepped away and packed her things. She locked the door behind her and left the building with slow footsteps. She didn't know that earlier in the day, a teacher had passed by and noticed the way she looked at the piano. She didn't know people had begun to wonder why she always lingered near the instrument. To her, she was just a cleaner doing her work, nothing more. The next morning, she arrived again at sunrise, following the same path, carrying the same old bag, living the same simple routine. She didn't expect anything to change. She didn't know that soon the teachers would ask her to do something she had tried to avoid for years. And she certainly didn't know that a single moment was coming, one she had never prepared for, that would reveal a part of her she had hidden from the world. For now, she simply walked into the empty school once again, ready to clean its rooms, unaware that her quiet life was on the edge of being noticed, understood, and transformed in a way she never imagined. The school was buzzing with energy the next morning. Posters for the cultural night were being taped on walls. Students were practicing lines for their performances, and teachers whispered anxiously about schedules and missing performers. Everyone seemed stressed, everyone except her. She continued her work the way she always did, quietly and calmly, with her small cleaning cloth tucked into her apron and her thoughts tucked neatly away from the rest of the world. She started with the hallways, wiping the windows so sunlight could brighten the school. As she worked, she heard bits of conversation from passing teachers. "We still don't have someone to replace the student pianist, and the event is only days away. We can't cancel the piano segment. It's a tradition." Their voices carried a tone of worry, the kind that spread quickly in a school. She didn't think much of it. Problems like that belonged to teachers, not to someone like her. Still, even as she continued sweeping, she couldn't help listening. She had once lived in a world where music events were a normal part of her life, but she had buried that world long ago. Now she only admired it from a distance. When she finally reached the music wing, she heard the choir instructor speaking with a group of teachers. "We need someone who can at least play something simple," the instructor said. "Anything is better than having an empty stage. Do any students know how?" "Not well enough for a performance." Then someone said, half laughing, "What about the cleaner? She's always hanging around the piano. Maybe she secretly knows how to play." The group chuckled lightly, not out of cruelty, but because the idea seemed so impossible to them. She froze for a moment in the hallway, gripping her broom. For a second she wondered if they were serious, but then she reminded herself they had no idea who she was or what she once knew. She stepped quietly into the room to continue her work, careful not to disturb their conversation. As soon as they noticed her, they lowered their voices, not wanting her to feel they were talking about her, even though she already knew. The instructor smiled politely. "Good morning," she said. She nodded softly and started collecting scrap papers from the floor. She moved around the room so smoothly, they almost forgot she was their dot as the teachers left to attend another meeting. She felt a strange heaviness in her chest. She didn't like attention, not even joking attention. She didn't want anyone thinking she had skills she had tried so hard to hide. She just wanted to do her job quietly, but life didn't always follow the quiet path she preferred. After the teachers left, the new music teacher walked in with a pile of sheet music under his arm. He looked tired, worried, and in a hurry. As soon as he noticed her, he let out a breath. "Busy morning, huh?" He said. She smiled politely. "Seems like it." He placed the sheets on the piano, then sighed. "We're in trouble. Our main pianist can't perform, and we have no one else ready for the cultural night. You wouldn't happen to know someone with a bit of piano experience, would you? Anyone at all?" She felt her heart skip, but she forced her expression to stay calm. "I don't really talk to many people here," she said softly. "Ah, right, of course," he replied. "I'm sorry. I'm just asking anyone I can think of. Even beginners could help at this point." She didn't answer, and he didn't push further. He simply gave her a grateful nod and continued setting up the room. As she walked toward the door with her cleaning cart, he added, "If only we could find someone who actually cares about this piano. Most students ignore it unless told to practice." She didn't turn her around. She knew if she made eye contact, he might see something she wasn't ready to reveal. The day went on, filled with noise and rushed rehearsals. The school hall was full of students practicing dance steps, teachers arguing over lighting setups, and staff moving chairs around. She wiped surfaces, rearranged misplaced items, and disposed of crumpled rehearsal scripts without complaint. At lunchtime, she sat alone on the bench behind the school building, where no one usually went. She ate simple food from a small container, enjoying the quiet. The distant sound of a student attempting to play scales on a piano reached her ears. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the uneven melody wash over her. She remembered how, once, many years ago, she could play scales in perfect rhythm without thinking. Her fingers would glide as if they already knew where to go. But she pushed the memory away. It belonged to a different chapter of her life, one that no longer fit the person she had become. When lunch ended, she returned to the music room to finish cleaning before the next rehearsal. To her surprise, the door was open and two teachers were inside, whispering urgently. "We can't ask a parent last minute. It would look disorganized." "What if we cut the piano performance completely?" "We can't. It's one of the main acts." She quietly entered, hoping they wouldn't notice her presence. But they did. One teacher sighed, rubbing his forehead. "You're here at the perfect time," he said to her, though he didn't look excited, more desperate. "Can I ask you something?" She paused, unsure. "Yes?" He walked up to her slowly. "I've noticed you spend a lot of time in this room. You always stop near the piano. Do you know anything about playing it? Even a little?" Her heart thudded so loudly, she almost thought they could hear it. She shook her head quickly. "No, not really. I just like the sound. Are you sure?" Another teacher asked gently. "We're in a very tough situation. Even someone who knows a few basics could help us during rehearsals. You don't have to play in the actual event if you don't want to. We just need someone to guide the choir's timing today." She tightened her grip on her cleaning cloth. "I don't think I can help. I'm not good anymore." She regretted the last word the moment she said it. The teachers exchanged curious glances. "Any more?" One repeated. She swallowed, wishing she could take the word back. I mean, I never practiced. Much. They didn't push, but she could feel their curiosity rising. Finally, the instructor spoke, her tone kind, not forceful. We're not asking you to perform on stage. Just maybe touch the keys? See if you can help? We have students waiting. If you don't know anything, then no problem. We'll figure something else out. She didn't like being the center of attention. The idea made her nervous. But she could also see the stress on their faces. They weren't mocking her or assuming. She was useless. They were simply desperate. She glanced at the piano, the instrument that once belonged to her life, her real life. Her real life stood there silently waiting. She took a slow breath. Just for a moment, she whispered, surprising herself. Teachers immediately stepped aside, grateful. Of course, just a moment is all we need. She walked toward the piano, her steps slow and careful, as if she were approaching something fragile. When she reached it, she hesitated before gently lifting the cover. Dust floated softly in the air. As light from the window fell across the keys, her fingers hovered above them, but didn't touch. She wasn't ready for that. Not yet. You can just try something simple, one teacher suggested. Anything at all, even a short tune. She closed her eyes for a brief second. Her heart pounded. Memories she had locked away for years began creeping toward the surface. When she finally placed her fingers on the keys, she felt a familiar warmth spread through her palms. The teachers leaned forward slightly, waiting to hear a beginner attempt. She could feel their expectation, and she could feel her own fear. She pressed one key. Just one. The sound echoed gently in the room. Then she stood up quickly, stepping back. I can't, she said softly, her voice trembling. The teachers looked surprised, but not disappointed. It's okay, one said quickly. Thank you for trying. Really, we didn't mean to push you. She nodded, grateful for their kindness. I just don't think I can help, she said again. They didn't argue. They simply thanked her and walked out to discuss other options. She stayed in the empty room for a moment, staring at the piano. The single note she played still echoed in her mind, stronger than sound. It awakened something she had kept buried. When she finally walked out, she felt different, uneasy, not because the teachers had asked her to play, but because touching the piano had reminded her of who she used to be. She tried to shake off the feeling and continued her work for the rest of the day. But deep inside, she sensed something she feared. Life was quietly leading her back toward the one thing she had tried to leave behind. She didn't know. The teachers were already discussing her in the hallway, quietly wondering if she knew more. Then she admitted she didn't know they would try again, and she didn't know that soon. She would no longer be able to hide the truth she kept locked inside her hands. The next day began quietly, but the quiet did not feel the same to her anymore. It carried a heaviness, like a shadow following closely behind. She walked into the school building with the same steady steps, the same worn-out bag, and the same clean cloth tucked inside. But her mind was far from calmed out. She could not stop thinking about the moment she had touched the piano key the day before. Just one note, yet it had stirred something in her, something she had kept hidden for so long that she almost forgot it existed. She told herself to forget it again, to push it aside and focus on her work. But her heart did not listen as usual. She started her morning by cleaning the classrooms, emptying the trash, wiping desks, and opening windows to let the fresh air in. She took her time, hoping that staying busy would help her stop thinking. But every time she paused, even for a second, her mind went back to the piano in the hallway. She could hear teachers talking again about the cultural night. Their voices were filled with concern. We're running out of time. We need someone who can at least guide the choir. If only we had a miracle." She kept her eyes down, pretending not to hear, but inside her chest, her heart tightened. When she finally reached the music wing, she noticed something unusual. The door of the main music room was slightly open, and soft piano notes drifted out. They were slow, uneven, played by someone still learning. A student was trying to practice. She walked quietly inside to empty the trash bin. The student looked frustrated, pressing the wrong keys repeatedly. "Ooh, why is this so hard?" The student muttered. She smiled gently, but didn't say anything. She simply emptied the bin and turned to leave. "Do you know how to play?" the student suddenly asked. She froze. "No," she replied quickly. "I just clean here." And she left before the conversation could continue. Her heart beat a little faster, not because the student had asked her, but because she knew the teachers were not going to give up easily. They had seen something in her expression the day before, something she failed to hide, and she was right. Later that afternoon, when she walked into the music room again to sweep the floor, she found 3 teachers already inside. They stood near, the piano whispering. When they saw her, they exchanged glances. "There she is," one of them said softly. She paused in the doorway. "Do you need me to come back later?" she asked. "No, no," another teacher said. "Actually, we wanted to speak with you, just for a moment." Her stomach tightened. She hated attention, especially when it came from more than one person. She stepped inside slowly. The music instructor approached her gently. "I hope you're not upset about yesterday. We didn't mean to pressure you." Her voice was warm, not demanding. She nodded. "It's okay. I don't think I can help." Her words were soft, almost like an apology. The instructor sighed. "We understand, but we're really struggling. We're out of options. We thought maybe you could try again, just to see if there's even a tiny bit you remember. You don't have to play anything difficult, just a simple melody. We won't force you," another teacher added. "But you're standing near the piano. You looked like someone who knew it well." Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't know her emotions had been so visible. She looked down at the floor. "I'm not the same as before," she whispered. "Before?" the new teacher repeated gently. She closed her eyes for a moment. She didn't want to explain. She didn't want to reopen the past. But she also didn't want them to think she was being difficult. "Please," the instructor said softly. "Just one small tune. If it doesn't work, we won't ask again. We promise." The room fell silent. She felt her hands trembling slightly. She didn't like being the center of attention, but something inside her, a small hidden part, told her to try. Not for them, but for herself. After a long moment, she said quietly, "Only for a minute." The teachers nodded gratefully and stepped back. She walked toward the piano slowly, each step feeling heavier than the one before. When she reached it, she placed her hand on the cover. Her fingers hesitated before lifting it, revealing the polished keys. The room felt warmer somehow, like the piano had been waiting for her. She sat down carefully. Her posture straightened without her noticing. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. The teachers waited silently, respecting her moment. She took a breath and pressed a single note. The sound was gentle, warm, familiar. Then she pressed another, and another. A melody slowly formed, not perfect, not strong, but soft and controlled. Her fingers moved carefully, as if remembering an old language she hadn't spoken in years. She played a simple tune, something children often learn first, but even that sounded smoother under her fingers. The teachers stared, their eyes widening gradually. Her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing steadied. The melody grew clearer. For a moment, She forgot she wasn't alone. She forgot the teachers were watching. She forgot she was supposed to be invisible. The music filled the room like a warm breeze. Then she suddenly stopped. The room remained silent. She stood up quickly. "That's all," she said softly, stepping away from the piano. One teacher took a step forward, astonished. "You said you didn't know how to play." "But the way you placed your hands, the way you controlled the notes, I used to practice," she said quietly, cutting him off. "A long time ago." "Used to?" Another repeated. She nodded. "But not anymore. I don't do that part of my life now." The teachers exchanged emotional glances. They hadn't expected this, not even close. They thought maybe she'd tap a few keys. But what she had shown was something completely different. The instructor stepped closer. Her voice was gentle, almost fragile. "You have a gift. Even if you think it's gone, it's still there. We can hear it." She looked down at the floor again. Compliments made her nervous. Being seen made her nervous. "We're not asking you to perform at the event," the instructor continued. "Just help us during rehearsals. We need someone who understands timing, even in the simplest form. Please, we don't have anyone else." The room grew quiet again. She felt torn. Part of her wanted to refuse, to run away, to stay hidden. But another part deep inside felt a small warmth. Like a forgotten spark waking up. She sighed slowly. "Only for today," she whispered. The teachers nodded gratefully. "Of course," the instructor said. "Just today." They brought in a group of choir students for practice. The students were surprised to see her sitting near the piano, but none questioned it. They simply took their positions. She placed her fingers lightly on the keys, her heart beating fast. She didn't play anything difficult, just simple chords to guide the choir's rhythm. The students followed, surprised at how smooth the practice felt. She focused on the music, not on the eyes watching her. And slowly, she began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: belonging. When the rehearsal ended, the students clapped politely. She felt her cheeks warm, embarrassed. The instructor smiled. "You helped us more than you know." "Thank you." She picked up her cleaning cloth again, returning to her familiar world, trying not to show how emotional she felt. As she left the room, she heard one teacher whisper to another, "She's not just helpful. She's talented, really talented." She walked away quickly, not wanting to hear more. Her heart felt too full. That night, when she went home, she sat alone in her small room, staring at her hands. They still tingled from touching the piano keys. She had tried so hard to walk away from music. But maybe music had not walked away from her. She didn't know the teachers planned to ask her again. She didn't know her small melody had already changed their entire plan. And she didn't know that soon they would discover the truth, that she wasn't just someone who used to practice. She was someone whose talent ran deeper than anyone at that school could imagine. She woke before sunrise the next morning, long before the town began to move. The small house was cold, and the air outside the thin windows felt still, almost nervous, as if it knew the day would not go quietly. She sat on the edge of her bed for a while, hands resting on her lap, feeling the weight of everything that had happened the night before. It wasn't just the sound of that piano echoing in her chest. It was the memory of voices, of eyes staring, of teachers whispering in confusion. She had tried so hard to blend in, to stay unnoticed. But the moment her fingers touched the keys in the music room, the silence she created had done the opposite. She moved slowly through her morning tasks, trying to focus on the simple things: warm water in a bowl, a clean dress, tying her hair, packing her small lunch. But her thoughts kept floating away from her hands. Every time she tried to focus, the image returned: the stunned teachers, the students frozen at the doorway. the last chord ringing through the room long after she lifted her fingers. She whispered to herself, "It was just a moment. They'll forget." She said it in a soft, hopeful way, but even she knew it wasn't true. Moments like that didn't just fade. Outside, the schoolyard was already busy when she arrived. Students rushed in different directions. Teachers called out reminders, and the morning sun painted the building in warm shades. She walked quietly across the yard, trying not to draw attention, but she could feel eyes on her. Not everyone looked her way, but enough did. Enough to make her steps slow down. A group of older students stood near the stairs. They weren't loud or rude. They just watched her, quiet and curious, as if they were trying to understand something they had missed. Yesterday, when she passed them on, she woke up before dawn again, but this time the quiet of her small home felt different. Not heavy, not full of worry, more like a pause before something new. She sat on the edge of her bed, listening to the faint hum of the world outside. The sky was still dark, yet she felt wide awake, as if her mind refused to rest. The events of the past few days kept circling in her thoughts. The unexpected performance, the whispers at the school, the head teacher's calm request, and the quiet stirring inside her own heart. She couldn't pretend anymore that nothing had changed. Something had. Something deep. She moved slowly through her morning routine, trying to steady herself. She washed her face, tied back her hair, and made a simple breakfast. She chewed slowly, not because she wasn't hungry, but because her mind was full. Every small sound around her, the tick of the clock, the kettle cooling, the soft rustle of the curtains felt sharper, as if her senses were tuned in more than usual. When she finished eating, she walked into the living room. Her eyes drifted toward the old wooden box again. It sat quietly in the corner, untouched for years yet oddly alive in her memory. She didn't open it. Not today. But she didn't walk past it either. She paused there for a few seconds, her fingertips lightly grazing the lid. Then she left for the school. The morning air felt cool on her skin as she stepped outside. Children were already walking toward the school, their voices soft and sleepy. A few adults made their way to the market. Everything looked the same, yet she felt a small flutter inside her chest the whole way there. She entered the schoolyard quietly, as she always did, but today something subtle had changed in the way others looked at her. There was less confusion now, and more warmth, like the kind of look someone gives when they see a part of you they didn't know existed. Few teachers greeted her with gentle smiles. Some students nodded shyly. She responded politely, though her voice was soft, almost unsure. During the day, she focused on her duties: cleaning rooms, arranging supplies, helping teachers bring things from one place to another, but her thoughts kept slipping away from the present. Every time she walked past the music room, she slowed down without meaning to. She told herself it was only curiosity, nothing more, but deep down she knew better. After lunch, she stepped outside to get some fresh air. The courtyard was calm, shaded by tall trees. A few students practiced dance steps on one side, while others sat on benches studying. She walked to the far corner, where the noise felt distant and peaceful. But she wasn't alone for long. A soft voice called out behind her. "Excuse me." She turned and saw one of the younger teachers approaching. The teacher's expression was warm and friendly, not intrusive. "I hope I'm not bothering you," the teacher said. "I just wanted to ask, have you thought any more about helping with the music program?" She hesitated. "I don't know if I'm the right person," she said quietly. The teacher smiled gently. "You're more than the right person. The way you played, it moved people. And the children here could learn so much from someone like you." The words touched her, but they also made her uneasy. She didn't see herself as someone special. She had spent years believing she was meant to stay in the background, to keep her talents hidden. Before she could respond, the teacher added, "You don't have to decide today. Just think about it." She nodded, grateful for the kindness in the teacher's tone. The rest of the day passed slowly. The sun was low when she finally finished her chores. The school grounds were almost empty by the time she stepped outside. She could have gone home immediately, but something held her back. Her feet moved on their own, carrying her toward the music room. The corridor was quiet as she walked through it. She reached the door and placed her hand on the handle. She didn't open it. She only stood there, feeling the cool metal under her fingers. Through the small glass window, she could see the piano sitting silently inside. She whispered to herself, "Why now?" She wasn't asking the piano. She wasn't even asking the teachers or the students. She was asking herself. After a long moment, she dropped her hand and walked away. When she reached home, the sun had already dipped behind the buildings. The streets were dim, the air cooler. Her house welcomed her with familiar stillness. She changed into more comfortable clothes and sat by the window, watching the last bit of daylight fade. She tried to distract herself by tidying the kitchen, sweeping the floor, organizing small things. But nothing worked. Her thoughts kept drifting back. The piano, the box, the sound of the keys when she played that day. Finally, she gave in. She walked slowly toward the wooden box. Her heart beat faster with each step. She knelt in front of it again, but this time she didn't pull away. She placed both hands on the lid and closed her eyes for a moment. Then she lifted it. The hinges made a soft creaking sound. Inside, wrapped in old cloth, were pieces of her past sheet music with fading ink, a small metronome, a few photos, and a folded scarf with embroidered edges. At the very bottom lay something she had tucked away years ago, a handwritten note. She picked it up slowly. The paper was worn, the edges curled. She unfolded it with trembling hands. The message was short, only a few lines. She read it silently, tears forming in her eyes, not because the message was sad, but because it reminded her of someone who once believed in her with all their heart, someone who had encouraged her to keep playing, someone whose voice she still heard sometimes when she closed her eyes. She pressed the note gently to her chest. Room felt full, not crowded, not overwhelming, just full of memory. She sat there for a long time, letting herself feel everything she had avoided for years: joy, fear, longing, hope. All of it mixed together. When she finally folded the note again and placed it back in the box, her face felt calmer. She didn't close the lid. Instead, she whispered, "Maybe it's time." Not a promise, not a final decision, but a beginning. The next morning, she walked toward the school with a quiet determination. The sky was clear, and the air was gentle. She carried no music sheets, no instruments, nothing that revealed her thoughts, but her steps were different, steady, purposeful. When she entered the school, she went straight to her usual duties, but her mind was clear now. At lunchtime, instead of sitting alone, she walked to the music room. The door was slightly open. She pushed it gently. Inside, the piano waited. She stepped in, closing the door softly behind her. She walked to the bench and sat down, her fingers hovering above the keys. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she placed her hands on the keyboard. The first note was soft, the second was steady. And soon, her music filled the room once more. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just honest. And in that moment, she knew one thing clearly. She wasn't running from her past anymore. She was walking toward it. The next morning felt different from the others. She woke with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't excitement, and it wasn't fear. It was something in between, a quiet acceptance mixed with a gentle pull toward something she knew she could no longer avoid. The memory of yesterday's music still lingered in the air of her thoughts, soft and warm. Like a candle that had not yet burned out, she moved through her house slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of thoughtfulness. Everything she touched, the kettle, the cup, the window curtain, felt like part of a life she had built to stay hidden. Yet now that same life seemed to be opening a door she had kept closed for too long. She prepared herself for the day, tying her hair neatly and putting on her simple clothes. When she stepped outside, the early air felt fresh against her face. She took a slow breath and began walking toward the school dot. As she approached the gate, she noticed the schoolyard was livelier than usual. Groups of students whispered to each other, and some glanced her way. Their faces carried a new mix of curiosity and admiration. A few waved shyly, and she returned the gesture, though her smile was small, an uncertain dot inside the school. She moved through her usual tasks, sweeping hallways and wiping desks. But her mind kept drifting back to the music room. Every time she passed it, she felt a soft pull, like a memory reaching for her hand dot around mid-morning. She heard the head teacher's voice, calling gently from behind her. "Do you have a moment?" She turned to face him. His expression was calm, thoughtful. "Yes," she replied quietly. He motioned for her to walk with him. They moved through the hallway together, passing classrooms filled with students reading and writing. "I wanted to thank you," he said after a moment. "Yesterday? I heard you playing again." Her steps slowed slightly, but she didn't look away. He continued, "You don't have to explain anything. I just want you to know that the children, many of them, have been talking about music in a new way. They want to learn. They want to try things they were too shy to try before." She listened quietly, unsure of what to say. He stopped near the courtyard, where a group of students practiced hand-clapping rhythms. "You brought something into this school, something we didn't have before." She lowered her head a little. "I didn't mean to make a big scene." He smiled softly. "You didn't. You offered something beautiful. And if you ever choose to help the children, even a little, it would mean a great deal." She felt the sincerity in his words. And for the first time, she didn't feel pressure, only gratitude. Later, during the lunch break, she found herself walking again toward the music room. She didn't think about where she was going. Her feet simply carried her there. When she reached the door, she paused, listening. Inside, she heard someone playing. The notes were soft, uneven, almost hesitant. She opened the door quietly. A young girl sat at the piano, pressing the keys slowly, trying to find a melody. The girl turned, startled when she saw her. "Oh, I'm sorry," the girl said quickly, standing as if she had done something wrong. "It's all right," she replied gently. "You can continue." The girl shifted nervously. "I was just trying to learn a part of a song, but I keep getting it wrong." She walked closer, her movements calm and gentle. "May I see?" The girl nodded and sat back down. She played the part again, her hands shaky. She watched quietly. Then she sat beside the girl and pointed softly at one of the keys. "Try pressing this one a little softer," she said. "Let it breathe before you move to the next." The girl followed her instruction. The sound improved, not perfect, but clearer. A small smile formed on the girl's face. "That's better," she encouraged. The girl beamed. "Are you going to teach music here?" She hesitated, unsure how to answer. "I don't know yet." "I hope you do," the girl said shyly. "You play so beautifully." She felt warmth spread through her chest at the girl's simple honesty. They practiced together for a few minutes, and she realized how natural it felt guiding the girl, correcting small mistakes, encouraging her gently. It didn't feel like something she was forcing herself to do. It felt like something she was meant to do. When the girl left to return to class, She remained in the room for a while, sitting alone at the piano. She placed her hands on the keys, letting them rest there. She didn't play anything, not right away. She just stayed still, breathing in the quiet. Finally, she played a melody that she hadn't touched in years. One she had once practiced endlessly, back when music was part of her everyday life. The notes flowed softly through the room, carrying memories with them. But this time, the memories didn't hurt. They felt gentle, like old friends. She spent the rest of the day moving through the school with a lighter heart. Even the students seemed more cheerful around her. She noticed small things: children laughing in groups, teachers humming while grading papers, a boy tapping a pencil rhythmically on his desk. The world around her was changing, but so was she. That evening, when she returned home, she felt a new energy inside her. She cooked a simple meal, ate quietly, and then went to the wooden box again. She didn't open it this time. Instead, she sat beside it and let her fingers rest on the lid. She whispered, "Maybe I can start again." But slowly. The next day, something unexpected happened. When she entered the school, a group of students approached her. They carried a small stack of music sheets. Their expressions were shy but hopeful. "Could you help us learn this?" one of the boys asked. She looked at the pages. "Simple beginner pieces. I don't know if I should," she replied softly. One girl stepped forward, clutching the papers to her chest. "Please, we really want to learn, and we think you'd be the best person to teach us." Her heart felt full. The sincerity in their voices, the hope in their eyes, it was something she never expected to see directed at her. She took a slow breath. "All right," she said quietly. "I can help you, but we will start small." The children nodded eagerly. That afternoon, she met them in the music room. She guided them gently, showing them how to place their fingers, how to breathe with the music, how to move slowly and listen closely. She didn't raise her voice or speak sternly. She simply guided them with patience. The younger ones laughed when they hit wrong notes, and she smiled with them. The older ones concentrated hard, determined to do well. And through it all, she felt a warmth growing inside her, a warmth she had once thought she had lost forever. By the end of the day, she walked home with tired hands but a peaceful heart. She knew now that something had begun, a journey she didn't plan, but one she was no longer afraid of. And as she closed her door behind her, she realized she was ready for whatever came next, because the music inside her was no longer silent. It was awake again. Part 6 will be written here in simple, natural, human-centric storytelling of about 1,700 words. The days after their conversation moved slowly, even though her mind felt as if it were running all the time. She tried to live normally, to follow her routine, to work as she always had, but something inside her had changed. It was small at first, almost quiet, but it was there, a gentle but constant reminder that someone believed in her, someone who was willing to give her a chance. Billionaire didn't return right away. She thought he might. She thought he would appear again the very next day, standing by the counter or walking through the door like he belonged there. But he didn't. And strangely, she was both relieved and disappointed. She needed time to think, time to understand what she truly wanted, time to convince herself that what happened that night wasn't just a moment of magic that would fade away if she reached for it. Her life had always been practical, grounded, shaped by responsibility. Dreams were expensive. Dreams required time. She didn't have and support she had never been given. She had learned to bury them gently instead of chasing them blindly. But now, someone had dug those dreams back up. Someone had shown them the light again, even if that someone was a powerful man whose world was nothing like hers. One afternoon, after a long shift, she stayed behind in the empty dining hall to wipe the tables one last time. The manager had stepped out, The staff had already left, and the building felt quiet, almost peaceful. The restaurant had a small upright piano tucked into the corner, used only during holidays when musicians came in to entertain guests. She had always walked past it without touching it. She didn't want people to ask her to play. She didn't want anyone to know, but today was different. She walked toward it slowly. Her heart beat in soft, steady thuds. She touched the edge of the wooden frame, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingertips. Then she sat down. She didn't have an audience this time. No wealthy guest staring, no staff watching, no billionaire demanding anything. Just her in a quiet room, with one soft light glowing above the counter. She placed her fingers on the keys, and she played. Not the dramatic piece she had played at the event, but something gentle, something she used to hum to herself as a child. A simple tune her mother used to love. A tune she hadn't touched in years. Her eyes warmed. The notes flowed naturally, shaped by memory and feeling, not perfection. When she finished, she let her hands fall into her lap. The silence afterward was soft. Comforting. She felt lighter. She didn't notice someone had entered the room. It wasn't until she heard a quiet voice behind her. "I was hoping I would find you here." Her breath caught. She turned. He stood by the doorway, the billionaire, watching her with calm eyes. She straightened. "I didn't hear you come in." "I didn't want to interrupt," he said. She rose from the bench, wiping her palms on her apron. "I didn't expect you to come back." "I wanted to give you time," he replied. "And I meant it when I said I wouldn't push you." She nodded slowly. He walked closer, his steps measured, respectful. "Have you thought about what I said?" "Every day," she admitted quietly. "And?" he asked. She took a deep breath. "I don't want to depend on anyone, and I don't want to accept help I can't repay." He shook his head gently. "This isn't about debt. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm offering support because you deserve a chance, not because you owe me." Her eyes softened. "Why do you care so much?" He paused, considering his answer. "Because when you played, I heard honesty. I heard something I haven't heard in a long time. And I realized the world needs people like you, people who remind us what's real." She swallowed hard. "That's a big thing to say." "It's the truth," he said. She looked down, her voice gentle. "I'm scared." "I know," he replied softly. "But being scared doesn't mean you shouldn't try." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but full waiting. Finally, she looked up again. "What would I have to do?" A small, warm smile touched his face. "First, let me introduce you to someone I trust," he said. "A teacher, a real teacher, someone who can guide you properly. Not because you're not skilled, but because you deserve refinement and structure." She nodded slowly. "After that," he continued, "if you feel ready, we can try for small performances, nothing overwhelming. Just places where you can get used to the stage again." Her heart beat faster. "That sounds like a lot." "It is," he admitted, "but you don't have to do any of it alone." She took a shaky breath. "I think I want to try." The billionaire's expression softened with something like relief. "Then we start whenever you're ready." She almost smiled. "I'm not ready tonight." He laughed softly. "Of course not. Tomorrow? Next week? Whenever you choose." For the first time in years, she felt something spark inside her, something bright. "And alive? Maybe. Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow it is," he replied. The next day, she met him outside the restaurant. He didn't arrive in a flashy car or with security guards. He came alone, dressed simply, as though he didn't want to overwhelm her. They walked together through quiet streets until they reached a small building tucked between shops. It wasn't grand. It didn't have tall pillars or expensive decorations. Instead, it looked warm and welcoming. Inside, they were greeted by an older man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "This is the musician I told you about, the billionaire," said. The teacher studied her carefully, not judging, not doubting, only observing. "You play?" he asked. She nodded. "A little. Little." He chuckled softly. "Everyone starts with a little. Come, sit, play something. Anything you like." She hesitated but walked to the piano. Her hands trembled lightly at first, but she placed them on the keys and let them settle. Then she played, not to impress, not to prove anything, just to be honest. When she finished, the room felt still. The teacher nodded slowly. "You have more than talent. You have heart. The rest we can build." Her chest warmed. "Are you willing to train?" he asked. "Yes," she said. The billionaire stood behind her, quiet but supportive. "Then we begin," the teacher said. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. She trained hard early mornings, late evenings, long hours of practice that left her fingers sore, but her heart full. She rediscovered parts of herself she had buried long ago. The billionaire visited often, sometimes just to check on her progress, sometimes to listen for a few minutes, sometimes to bring her a warm drink when she forgot to eat. He never pushed, never demanded. He simply encouraged. Their friendship grew naturally. Quiet conversations, gentle laughter, mutual respect. She came to understand him more, too. Behind his wealth and authority, behind his stern exterior, he was someone who had lost things just like her. Someone who had learned to hide softness behind strength. Life didn't change overnight. She still worked. She still lived simply. But her world felt different now, wider, brighter. One evening, months after her first lesson, the teacher approached her with a calm smile. "It's time," he said. "Time for what?" He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Your first small performance." Her heart thudded. "Already?" "You're ready," he said. "More ready than you think." The billionaire stood nearby, arms crossed, but his eyes warm. "You can do it." She looked between them. "I'm nervous." "Good," the teacher said. "Nerves mean you care." A week later, she stepped onto a small stage inside a warm, cozy hall filled with maybe 40 people, friends of the teacher, local music lovers, a few guests the billionaire invited. No grand lights, no pressure. Just a room full of people who wanted to listen. She sat at the piano. Her heart pounded. The billionaire sat in the front row, his eyes steady, reassuring. She took a deep breath, and she played. The music flowed from her fingers, soft and strong, emotional and steady. She let herself feel every note, every memory, every moment that had led her here. When she finished, the room erupted in warm applause, not loud, not wild. But sincere. She looked up, her eyes wet. The billionaire stood, clapping slowly, pride shining in his expression. She smiled for the first time in a long time, without holding anything back. She had done it. Not for him, not for the crowd, for herself. After the performance, he approached her. "How do you feel?" he asked softly. She laughed through her tears. "Like I found myself again." "Good," he said, "because the world deserves to hear you." She looked up at him, unsure how to express the gratitude she felt. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything. You don't owe me thanks," he said gently. "You did the work. You walked the path. I just held the door open." She shook her head. "You did more than that." He smiled softly. "Then I'm glad, truly." They stood there in a moment of quiet understanding. A waitress, a billionaire. Two lives that had no reason to cross, yet somehow met in the most surprising way. Not because of power, not because of status, that because he heard her, and she finally learned to hear herself. Her journey wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt ready for whatever came next.